Hey, hello, how's it going? Welcome back to another Dark and Darker video. It's me, Cranberry. How's it going? Hopefully you are doing well today. Now, clicking the video, you know it's a tier list video, right? You might be wondering why visually this tier list is so scuffed. Now, originally, I went to Tier Maker. I scrolled around. I couldn't find any tier lists that that were up to date, right? In early access, we've added a new character, the Warlock, right? So I go into Tier Maker. For the life of me, I can't find a tier list that has the Warlock in it. I go and I try to make a tier list, and Tier Maker says, no, I will not allow you to do this. I don't know what it is. Apparently, I've been shadow banned from Tier Maker. I don't know what the problem is. So here we are in MS Paint. I'm trying to make a tier list here instead. It's going to be a little visually bad, but hopefully you understand and you won't mind it too much. I apologize for that. Now let's talk about the parameters of our tier list today. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be doing two tier lists for the record, right? We're going to be doing one tier list talking about how the characters play in a 3v3, or in a three-man squad. Talking about how the characters play in a three-man squad. The other thing we're talking about is how they play as solo characters, right? And we're evaluating that both, you know, in their ability to operate in three-man dungeons and their ability to operate in one-man zones like the Goblin Caves for now is the only one-man zone in the game, right? But that's what we're looking into here, and yeah. And one thing I will say, there are a lot of cool things that all of these characters have, right? The Iron Mace has done a very good job of making these characters feel very different from each other, right? But when it comes down to it, the way I evaluate these characters, I would say 90% of their value is based on how they perform in PvP, because that's how you're going to die most of the times. I would say, rough estimate for me, maybe 90% of my deaths are to other players. That might not be accurate exactly. Or they're either by players or they're because of players, because I got into a fight with a player and was distracted and an AI killed me, right? I would put it somewhere roughly in the 90% range, right? So for me at least, PvP capacity is without a doubt, the most important factor here. There's other things that you take into account too when evaluating them, sure. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is how they operate against other players, right? And we'll start off talking about... well, I haven't thought about this actually. Do I want to do ones or threes first? I don't know. Let's do 3v3 first. I think it's the more commonly played maps at the very least. I think more people tend to go to the three-man dungeon, whether or not it's by themselves or with friends. I think that's generally the more common map to be played. So let's talk about 3v3s first. And we'll start, you know, in order here. I guess it's not in alphabetical order, but the order I have them listed. We'll start off with the Barbarian. For me, in 3v3s, I put Barbarian probably in the A tier. Ooh, one more thing I wanted to talk about too, sorry. We'll put him there for now, I guess. But one very important aspect to this tier list is evaluating characters based on middle of the road gear, right? Not starter gear, not super high-end equipment. We're talking about your average experience playing as or playing against this character, right? How much gear they're gonna have on average, right? Roughly in the center, because a lot of these characters, when they have super high-end gear, they warp the game in a weird way. The one that I think of first and foremost is Fighter. When you have a fighter wearing super high-end damage or physical damage reduction armor, they become pretty much unkillable to any other melee class, right? And Barbarian to some extent can do this as well. If a Barbarian really wants to, they want a full stack damage reduction gear, they can get pretty high too, but they can't get quite as high as the fighter. At least in early access so far, I've seen a couple fighters in like the 75% physical damage reduction range, right? When you take into account that they have second wind, if you're fighting a full HP fighter with 75% damage reduction, they effectively have the life bar of 6 players, right? Which is a lot of health. That's an insane amount of health. And if you are a ranger, you are not going to kill them. No matter what you try to do, you will not kill this fighter. You might be able to escape them, but you will never kill them, pretty much, is the problem here. So we're not taking this into account, like, we're not taking high-end gear into account, we're just saying on average, right? So with that in mind, let's talk about the Barbarian here in a bit more detail. Barbarian, What are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of this character? It's obviously a melee character. They have access to throwing axes, which are very strong. They're a very good tool. But ultimately, this is a character who is very big and he's very scary. He yells and then he runs kind of fast for a little while, and then that's kind of it, right? But they're very good if you are supporting them correctly, right? Not a long time ago, but a while ago, back in, I think it was more of an issue in playtest 4. I think that's when people were really upset about it. There was this combination of Barbarian, Cleric, and Wizard. Maybe this was playtest 3. I'm getting them mixed up a little bit here, but I believe it was playtest 4, that the community here was outraged about Barbarian, Cleric, and Wizard being too strong. The Cleric would heal a Barbarian, the Wizard would cast haste on the Barbarian, and the Barbarian would kill your whole team, right? That was sort of the concept. And the reason why that's such an effective strategy is because most fights are in narrow corridors, right? And if you're trying to engage in melee combat with the Barbarian, probably only one person can engage with the Barbarian, right? So if you are, you know, trying to fight Barbarians, right? What's going to happen is that the Barbarian's going to win the 1v1 against your front line, right? Because you can only fight them one-on-one, not literally. And obviously, if you have like a ranger, you have like, you know, another character kind of like trying to sneak around like a road to get to the back line, these things can happen too, obviously. But what would often end up happening is the Barbarian would just kind of one by one just kind of bulldoze straight through your team, right? And that's just kind of the nature of the game, is how the maps are designed. It's just how things play out usually, right? That's a very strong thing. You can do that with Barbarian, but you can do that with other characters too. They're not uniquely capable of doing this. Mainly, Fighter is the other character that can do this. And while I think that on average, Barbarian might do better of that bulldozing playstyle, there are other things that Fighter has that Barbarian doesn't have, that are important to talk about too, which we'll get to when we talk about Fighter. But for now, Barbarian for me goes in the A tier. Now, Cleric. If we're talking about 3v3 combat, Cleric is absolutely the #1 character. Sorry that we're cutting off Barbarian here a little bit with the name blocking it, but Cleric here is just an unbelievably easy #1 pick for me. It goes back to the same concept we're talking before about gear, right? When you have a fighter with 75% damage reduction, it's as if you have to kill 6 people to kill this one fighter, right? When you take into account Cleric heals, and you're in a fight, if the Cleric is effectively using their healing spells and their buffs and their shields and etc., it's like having to kill 9 people, right? They're very good at keeping you alive. It's a very useful ability, especially extremely when fighting other players. Not to mention, they don't have the worst weapons in the world. Maces are, I don't know if you know this, not terrible for hitting heads, right? They can oftentimes, you know, kind of come over shields a bit and hit people in the head. It's easy to land headshots with them usually. Not the easiest weapon in the world, but not a terrible weapon to hit people with, right? They have the Windows Vista, aka, I think it's Judgment, right? Where they do the little prayer and they half health you with a magic bolt, right? They have cool abilities, they have utility, they have a lot going for them, right? And they've been, bar none, the strongest character for a while now. And I said this in my last tier list video. I said this in a comment recently in one of my YouTube videos, because someone was telling me that they thought bards were they thought clerics were too strong, right? And I am okay with clerics being as strong as they are, right? I think it's perfectly fine in a game like this to have support characters be strong. I think that's fine, right? And I'm sure it's maybe kind of annoying for some people, but you know, if you're playing a game, but let's say for example you're playing League of Legends, right? And let's say you think that junglers are too strong and you're annoyed, so you choose to not have a jungler anymore, right? That's kind of your fault on your team for like just being like, yeah, we've decided to forego jungling because we think it's too strong. It's like, it's kind of your fault at this point. So I don't know. I don't think I mean, if there's one character you're required to have on your team in 3v3s, I would say it is Cleric. I think they're the strongest character for it. Not even, I wouldn't say it's not even close. It is actually a little close, and we'll get to that later. But for now, that's where I put Clerics. Rangers. Where do I put Rangers in my tier list? I for a little while was kind of falling off on Rangers. I thought they were kind of a little bit washed. I think I'm coming back around on Rangers. I think Rangers are actually one of the strongest characters for solo play. I think they fall off a little bit in 3v3, but I think ultimately, I put Rangers in the A tier as well. And the one real reason why, for me, Rangers go in the A tier is because hunting traps are such a strong ability to have. Now, we'll talk about it when we get to 1v1s, because in spoilers, Rangers are kind of carried hard by hunting traps in solo gameplay. But in threes, right? Bear trapping someone, and this is just for solos too, bear trapping someone is pretty much a death sentence, right? If you bear trap someone and they don't die, something has gone terribly wrong, right? Something has gone horribly wrong, and you have messed up severely somehow. Assuming you're there, obviously, right? If you put a bear trap down and then you leave, and then someone gets bear trapped, you know, whatever. Fuck, you know. Don't talk to me if you say something like that to me in the comments. I refuse to talk to you. But if you put someone in a bear trap, they should die every time, no matter what. Like, you know, oh, their clerics are healing them the whole time and yada yada, whatever. You should be able to kill them. It's kind of crazy if you can't. It's an unbelievably strong tool if you can set it up correctly. It's just a matter of diligence. It's a matter of paying attention to sound. When I play Ranger, I usually use the Enhanced Hearing perk. Extremely useful for hearing enemy teams before they can hear you. You set up an ambush with a bear trap. You turn off all the lights around the door. They open it. Boom, bam, done. Right? It's very good. Where Rangers do fall off a little bit is just overall damage. People are hard to hit. I mean, obviously, you know, GG, like, you know, get good, like, click heads, etc., whatever you want to say. No matter what, at the end of the day, you're not going to hit every single shot you make, right? It can be a little tricky to play the character. There's a little bit of a skill requirement to play them. And even with, like, you know, a highly skilled player will miss shots sometimes. And like I said before, you know, it's not like 100% of your evaluation. You shouldn't be evaluating these characters based on super high-end gear. But they do kind of struggle. Well, they struggle with a couple things. They struggle with fighters. Fighters can have bows, and they can shoot back. Fighters oftentimes will have more armor, and they can win that war of attrition sometimes. Rangers obviously have the triple shot. They have, you know, they have the ability to eat food. But fighters, you know, they have something for you there. You got to be careful about with this Ranger. Also, Rangers very, very weak against rogues in melee combat. Rogues are very good at sneaking up on Rangers. It's sort of like their one job in life is to be the kamikaze bomber. They sneak around the Barbarian or the fighter. They get to the back line and they just start stabbing the shit out of the Ranger. They're gonna die soon afterwards too, but they've taken out the Ranger alongside. So usually, it's worth, is the idea. And Rangers do not handle that well. It's a struggle for them. Now, I guess up next is the Warlock here. I am sorry to say, it's the new character. It's a work in progress. This character is just not finished yet. And I think, if we're being honest with ourselves, when it comes to actually being able to fight other players, I think we put Warlock in the bottom tier. Now, Warlocks have 4 spells. One of them weakens enemies. I don't think I've ever had a Warlock use this on me. And I've never used this spell, so I have no real concept for how good it is. I'm sorry to say. Just not really quite sure. But, it's a thing they do. They have one spell that drains enemies' health, but makes them stronger. I have only ever seen Warlocks use this against enemies to deal more damage to them. It is a very weird and bad damaging spell. They have their, I think it's Curse of Agony spell. I forget whatever the curse is that damages them slowly over time and heals them if they take the one perk for it. They have that spell. That spell's pretty cool. It has a lot of utility just in general, right? It's very nice to be able to keep yourself topped off by using that spell to drain health from both AIs and, you know, enemies. It's very cool. But it is not enough damage. In PvP, it is just not enough damage. It's not worth casting. is the main issue. It does like 20 damage total. For the cast, if it hits, it's got very short range. And if you it doesn't have the slowest cast time ever, but it's not a fast cast either. So if you're trying to cast this and a man's pretty close to you, you're gonna do this, they're gonna cut your head off right afterwards. It's not gonna. And their last spell is actually one of their coolest ones, Hellfire. We haven't talked about that yet. We also haven't talked about the main mechanic about how Warlocks use their own health to cast their spells. Not really that big of a concern, honestly, but the issue with Warlocks is specifically they have no real way to use their spells to deal damage. Hellfire, it's a really cool spell. It's a very slow-moving projectile that can pass through walls. It deals a ton of damage per second and takes up a pretty wide space. So it's mainly used as area denial. That's the one thing that Warlocks do really well is, hey, if your team needs to run away, you can throw down a Hellfire into a doorway, and the enemy team can either choose to not walk through it or walk through it and pretty much die. Those are their two choices. So it's a good spell for that one thing. The problem is that area denial, it's hard to capitalize on area denial unless you are trying to run away. That's what it's mainly for. If you're trying to run away, or you're trying to, I don't know, just keep someone locked down in a certain zone, so that way maybe an AI comes to kill them or something, maybe the zone's blocking them out from a certain area. I don't know, but it's just not, the Warlock has no real offensive tools, which is strange because they're a Warlock. When you think of like fantasy settings, you think of Warlocks, you think of Eldritch Blast, the D&D spell that is like the signature move of Warlocks, right? The fact that they don't have just like a laser gun is very strange, and they'll probably add it. I would imagine they'll add it, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the damage curse, one that heals them, will be the Warlock stand-in for Eldritch Blast, which, if you ask me, is kind of sad, but whatever. I don't know. Moving on, we've got the Fighter. Fighter, for me, for my money, also goes in the A tier. This is a pretty top-heavy list, I gotta say, so far. It's a pretty top-heavy list. Fighter, it performs pretty much the same role as Barbarian, but with extra utility. They're generally a little bit tankier. They have the ability to heal themselves, and they have the ability to fight at range, but they trade all of that for a little bit less offensive power, right? They don't quite have the bulldozing ability of the Barbarian. They have the speed boost, they have the sprint, right? And when they sprint, they don't even lose armor like the Barbarian does when he rages. But ultimately, fighters generally just output a lot less damage than Barbarians do. Just the truth of it is how things go. But they're good. They're good. And they have access to a lot of weapons. I will say one thing that I just don't have enough experience with. I've heard some people swear that longsword is the best weapon in the game, and a good, you know, it's a skilled Roy can beat any fox. I've heard that a skilled longsword user can beat any barbarian in a fight, right? And that's probably true, but you just don't see many skilled longsword users is the main issue, right? And I am not a skilled longsword issue, so I can't really weigh in on it too much. I'm sorry to say. I want to learn, though. Longsword seems pretty cool. I want to learn how to use the weapon more. But that's just kind of where I'm at here. They're still a good character. Second Wind is a very good ability. Sprint's a good ability. Their passes are kind of especially when you're first leveling them. But once you get some gear, they're pretty good. They're pretty neat. Up next is the Wizard. Wizard tragically has felled off pretty hard since it got nerfed. I think this was playtest 4 is when it got really heavily nerfed. A lot of the damage got removed. Like I remember Fireball. Fireball got gutted. Wizard just lost a lot of damage. They still have that utility role of the Barbarian Cleric Wizard comp, where they would haste the Barbarian and the Barbarian would go buck wild. The problem is that Bard has kind of eaten Wizard's lunch in that regard. We'll talk about Bard in a bit later, but that role of the support character for your bulldozer strategy has been completely eclipsed by Bard. There's no reason to use, I mean, there is a reason to use Wizard. You can still cast Haste. No one's stopping you from casting Haste, but just generally speaking, Bard now performs this support role way better, in my opinion. Way, way better. So what does Wizard do? They're weird. They kind of like don't do damage as good as they used to. A lot of their damage, a lot of their spells at point blank require them to either stand still with magic missile, or hurt themselves with fireballs, or electrocute themselves with chain lightning, right? They don't have a great way to fight people who are close to them, which is not a good thing. Not a great thing. Invisibility is still fun. It's still very tricky to use, but it's not very great in threes. I think for me, and they still have some utility, right? Don't get me wrong, but for me, I put Wizard probably down here in the C tier. Yeah, I don't fuck with Wizard. I think this guy is kind of stinky. The only reason why he's ahead of Warlock is because he actually is like a complete character. Actually has like a good balance of utility spells and damage spells. And they have like a defined role. They're just bad at the role is the problem right now. In the current iteration of the game, they're just not very good. I think we should buff Wizard, personally. And I know there's some people out there who are really good with Wizard. I understand that. But those people are just really good at the game. I don't think they're carried by Wizard. I think that they're carrying Wizard. If you were to ask me, I think Wizard's kind of a stinky boy. And I would like... Just give him Fireball back, man. It wasn't that bad. Fireball, if you got hit by a fireball, it was your fault. I think we should make this man better, personally, if you're asking me. Now, Rogue. Rogue is strange. Now, playtest 5, Rogue was kind of a scourge. People thought Rogue was unbelievably busted because they gave Rogue a double jump, which is a very strong feature that it has for 1v1s. It's still relevant, but not nearly as relevant in 3s, right? Rogue in 3v3 right now is, I think, bad. I don't actually know. Unfortunately, this I almost said this playtest. In early access, there's a limit to how many characters you can have. I unfortunately hit the character limit, so I cannot play Rogue. Rogue is the one character I think I don't have. I'm trying to think. I think I have all these characters except for Rogue. So I haven't played them at all this playtest. But in my experience, for 3v3 combat, I don't think rogues are very strong. Maybe I could be wrong. Like, against the same thing where I know there's a lot of really good rogues. I know that in like the high roller leaderboards, rogues kind of run things. And I may, I could be wrong about that. I don't know, I guess. But I think it's more so that it's just good players playing the characters and less so the characters are that good. And I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think for me, you know what? I'll put them in B tier. I think they have a lot going for them that the Wizards just don't have. I think the one thing that they really have is that ability to kill the flank, right? If they can get past your enemy team's front line and get to the back line, they'll tear a Cleric to pieces in no time, right? They can do that. They can get on someone and just tear them apart pretty quickly. But the problem is that they ever see a fighter or a barbarian, things do not go well. They also kind of struggle against rangers if the ranger is paying attention, basically. Because even when you're trying to do those little flanking maneuvers, the ranger will see you usually and will be shooting at you the whole time. And by the time that the rogue gets to the ranger, the ranger will just take out their spear and stab them in the face and they're dead. It doesn't always go that way, obviously, but it happens a lot of the time. So something to be mindful of. They are cool. And we're talking about utility, too. For a long time, rogues were the only characters that could pick locks. However, we have bards now, who also have the capacity to open locks. So, something to keep in mind is that they don't, that's not a big part of the game, but it was a niche that rogues had access to in 3-man groups that they now no longer have access to. Now bards are the kings of opening lock chests, and we'll talk about that. Probably not at all, actually, now I think about it, because it's not that relevant to the grand scheme of things. Bard. Bard is our last character, and this is maybe my hottest take here on the list. For me, in Bards for 3-man combat, right up here, baby. It's significantly not as good as Cleric, but I think it's significantly above the rest of the A tier here, right? Bards just do a lot. Bards do a lot of crazy shit for your team in a fight. They give your whole team 50 armor and magic resistance. They give you attack speed buffs. They give you move speed buffs. They do all of the shit that wizards used to do, but it's for your whole team now instead of just one person. They give clerics their spells back. They recover all of your recoverable HP for you. They deal damage to enemies through walls when they're stuck at a choke point. They do so much crazy shit. They stop other clerics from casting spells. They have an insane amount in their toolkit, and it's important to note that it's not easy to use correctly, right? And I'm not saying this is like a skill thing. It's like, oh, just be good at the bards. I mean, literally, a lot of times you will be in combat in certain areas where you just can't get enemies in range of your music, and you can't use it effectively, right? Like, for example, the canceling enemy spells things, it's only got a limited range, right? So you won't always be able to be close enough to your enemies to cancel their spells and then coordinate it, an attack on them. It's just not realistic. It's very hard to do, and you know, you are very squishy as a bard. Even with the 50 armor you give yourself with the harmonic, I forget what the name of the songs are actually, sorry. But the loot song that gives you armor, even with that, you're still a pretty squishy guy. You only have access to mostly light armor. It's just, you know. And you also have access to pretty bad weapons. When it comes to ranged weapons, you have hand crossbows and survival bows. When it comes to melee weapons, like your best is like a falchion or an arming sword. Not the most like, you know, menacing kit of weaponry that you're at your disposal as a bard, but it's just with your buffs, you're not easy to kill either. I've had times as a bard where I've buffed myself up and I've just dueled barbarians because I'm just moving faster than they are, and they can't hit me, and I just weave in and out and I hit them. Pretty much like a rogue would do, almost, kinda. You can hit rogue level dueling capacity with the movement buffs you can give yourself as a bard sometimes. They've got a lot going for them. I like them. But I think gun to my head, clerics are still way better. I think maybe you could just make another tier and you can move everyone down and put bard one tier below cleric, but for now we'll leave it here. It's semantics at this point. You get what I'm saying, probably. But this is my 3v3 tier list. Let's put it all back down here real quick. Hold on. Gotta undo. There we go. Okay. So, now let's talk about 1v1s, right? Let's talk about the meta for 1v1. Going back into Barbarian. For me, Barbarian is a great 1v1 character. One of the best in the game. But I used to love them for 1v1s. I would have times where I'd run around the Goblin Caves and I just terrorize people as Barbarian. I'd fucking Kool-Aid Man, or I guess more so, Jack Nicholson shining people through doors, fucking smash them down, tear them to pieces. It was great. But something's up. Something's not working with it anymore. I don't know what the problem is exactly. I think it's that Rangers are... I don't know. I think I put Barbarian still in the S tier. I'm thinking about it more. I think Barbarian's in the S tier for solo player. Specifically for Goblin Caves. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it down in A tier. They're S tier if we're talking about just Goblin Caves, but if you're trying to take a Barbarian to the Ruins or to the Howling Crypt by yourself, they definitely do fall off. What I will say about Barbarians is that if you can manage to sneak up on a team and they don't know you're there, and you have a Felling Axe, you can just 1, 2, 3 kill them all sometimes, right? It can happen. If they're not prepared for you, you can just jump up on them and start chopping them to pieces. To the effect that no other class can, basically. Rogues can't do that shit. Rogues, they can kill maybe one guy, and then the other 2 players turn to them, and then you have to run away. That's really your only option. So I think for me, Barbarian goes into the A tier. They just, a little bit of shortcomings in the other maps. Goblin Caves, though. Goblin Caves, they fuck shit up. It's all narrow hallways for the most part. Like 90% of the level is narrow hallways. It's hard to engage them at long range as a ranger. You can still get fucked up by bear traps, so be careful. Watch out, Barbarians, for the bear traps. But and there's so many doors that they can just bust down. It's crazy just how strong a character is when they don't have to worry about doors anymore. They're good. Barbarian's good. Moving on to the Cleric. I've had some people swear to me that Cleric is strong as a solo class. I just don't see it. I feel like, again, this is middle of the road. If we're talking about like a super high geared Cleric, then sure, they can be very hard to fight. If we're talking just middle of the line, level gear Cleric, I think I put him in like the C tier. It's nice that they can heal themselves, so they can keep themselves at top health when they're fighting, you know, against AIs. They're okay at PvE, but when it comes to actually PvP, who do they beat? Let's go through the list here. Who does a Cleric beat in a 1v1 consistently? It's not Barbarian. I don't think it's Ranger. I think Rangers usually kill Clerics pretty easily, from my experience at least. Clerics, I think Clerics can take Warlocks. I think Cleric has the win against Warlocks. I think they lose to Fighters. I think they beat Wizards. I think they beat Wizards on average in 1v1s. But I think also Wizards just get away from Clerics. Clerics don't have the ability to lock down Wizards. Wizards will just go invisible and run away from you and haste themselves and throw fireballs. And you will just dodge the fireballs and heal yourself, and it'll be a stalemate. I actually don't think a Cleric... Maybe they can. I think a Cleric kind of just can't kill a Wizard. And I think it goes both ways there. I think they kind of stalemate each other. Rogue can absolutely kill a Wizard. Or kill a Cleric. But also, if Rogues don't get... This is for most cases, though. If Rogues don't get the jump on a Cleric, Cleric can win that fight. If it's like a fair 1v1, you see the Rogue coming, you can just bonk them on the head twice with your mace and they're dead. Right? So there's that. But if Rogue... And, you know, if Rogue gets to jump on you, you're fucking toast. You are unbelievably dead. Right? No matter what you're doing. Because here's the thing, too. Important to note. Clerics have a low HP maximum. They don't have that much health to work with, and no matter how much armor they stack, they're still weak to poison because poison's magic damage. So, especially if they're also using weak point, whatever it's called. Is it exploit weak point? What's the weak point attack? Is it just called weak point attack? I think that's what it might be. Weak point attack. The rogue ability that reduces armor. They will tear you to pieces no matter how much gear you got if you're a cleric, basically. There's that. I think they're pretty bad. I think they're pretty bad at dueling. Rangers for me, I have changed. I have transformed. Rangers for me go in the S tier for solo gameplay. They are very good at 1v1ing. Assuming you can hit, let's say, 2 shots on your enemy before they get to you in melee combat. If you can hit 2 shots, you probably win the fight most times, right? With the exception of maybe a Barbarian, but even then you should be able to hopefully weave out of their attacks, right? You move faster than them. Except for when they're raging. But hopefully the idea is that they pop rage to close the distance faster, and then you run away and run their rage down. While also, you know, pelting them with arrows the whole time too, hopefully. Right, that's the idea. It's a pretty good fight. Most times. The question here's my question for you, dear viewer. Who beats the Ranger, right? That's how we should kind of think about this in general. Who beats the Ranger in a 1v1? I think Barbarians often don't. I think that Clerics don't. Warlocks don't even fucking talk to me. Not even close. It's like a 9-1 matchup, I feel like. Fighters can. Again, heavily armored fighters can pose a threat to Rangers. That is a true thing. However, against all of these matchups, you're going to have one tool that nobody else has in the game, and that is bear traps. Bear traps are the equalizer for every single fight in this game for Rangers, because when someone gets in a bear trap, they're dead. You've killed them. Effectively. They're not going to survive that. The bear trap does bleed damage over time to them when they're stuck in it, and they have to interact with the bear trap to unlock it, which means they can't block. Even if they have a shield, they can't block anymore while they're interacting with the trap. So you can just get free headshots on them the whole time. And they're even usually bending their head down, presenting it to you as you're doing it. So it's just a rough one. I think that on average, Rangers beat pretty much every single character on this. Fighters are the hardest matchup for Rangers, but even then, they still win it, and they kill everyone. They kill every single person. Again, Rogues, if they get the jump on you, that's the case for every single character. Usually they just don't, though, is the thing. They usually just don't get the jump on you is the main issue. Because you, as a Ranger, have the ability to hear better. You have elven ears. So, It's good. I could rant about this for probably another hour. Rangers first, and also very good in the main dungeons as well, not just Goblin Caves. I'm looking at this through the lens of Goblin Caves mostly, because that's where I play most of my singles gameplay. But even bringing this to the ruins or to the Howling Crypt, even they still can operate pretty well. They don't have great 3v1 potential. They struggle with that a little bit for sure, but bear traps. You're taking one of them down with you probably, and you can maybe kill one person with a bear trap. You know, bear trap them, shoot them, then run. Set up another bear trap. They're chasing you down. Bear trap, shoot them. You know, and now you're now in a 1v1, right? They have that ability basically. I'm loving Ranger a lot right now currently. I think they're very good. Warlock. I'm sorry to say once again, Warlock, get some more fucking spells, idiot. Back in the D tier with you. I didn't mention it at all, I don't think yet. Warlocks do have one unique ability in that their ability to heal themselves with their Curse of... Oh, whatever it's called. Curse of Agony, Curse of Torture. I don't know what the name of the spell is. I'm sorry. But their curse ability scales incredibly with magical healing, right? I assume this is an error in design here for this, but the Warlock, whenever you deal damage with the spell, every tick of damage heals you for 1 health, right? And with magical healing, it heals you, every tick of damage heals you that plus to magical healing, right? So if you have, for example, a Warlock with +5 magical healing, and you put the curse on someone, instead of healing 1 damage per tick, you now heal 6 damage per tick, right? Which is an incredible amount of health. You become very hard to kill if you have a lot of this ability, but you can only have 1 stack of it at a time on someone, and if it doesn't do much damage is the problem. Even then, to my understanding, the curse does not scale as well with magical damage. It only scales crazily with damage or with damage healed. Sorry, it only has crazy scaling with healing. Does not have crazy damage scaling. Right, is the main issue with the spell. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe if you get +15 magically healing on your Warlock, you just become unkillable. But I think no matter how much you're healing per second, if a fighter comes over to you and 2 taps you in the head with a falchion, you're gonna die no matter how fast you're healing. Is sort of like my thought at least. So I don't know. I don't like them. I don't respect them. The fireball zoning has even less utility when you're just by yourself, when you're not stalling for a teammate to flank or whatever. So I don't respect Warlocks. But hey, listen, this is all taking into account that the Warlocks only have 4 spells. When Bard only had the 1 instrument, I thought they were terrible too. Right? And now look at them. I think they're one of the best characters in the game for 3v3. So Warlock can definitely do better. For now, stinky bad character. Up next, we have Fighter. Fighter, for me, I think goes into the B tier. I like Fighter. Again, they're going to get compared a lot to Barbarian, and they have that extra utility, which is very cool. But when it comes to being a player by yourself, I think the most important thing is your ability to kill. And I think Barbarians kind of just edge them out a little bit too much in this sense. I think that they can just... If you get into melee combat with a Barbarian as a fighter, I think they're just going to chop your head off most times still. Again, this is taking into account that I know nothing about Longsword Fighter. I've been told that Longsword Fighter absolutely crushes Barbarians, but I don't know for certain. So, for now, this goes here, but with the caveat that I'm not experienced enough to have an assessment on how strong Fighter is with Longswords. They're still good. They're still, don't get me wrong, they're still pretty solid. Second Wind is still a good ability for dueling. Sprint is still pretty good for chasing at people who are running away from you, which is nice. And, yeah. You know, like, here's the thing, too. There's just not much magical damage in this game. When we talk about, you know, how fighters with high armor can just absolutely kill Rangers and Barbarians, the reason why that's so crazy is because there's just not many wizards. Rogues have, like, half their damage is melee as well. Half of it is magical from poison damage, so... You know, there is that still. I've had rogues, you know, absolutely murder me, but the problem is that I think on average, even when rogues get the jump on a fighter, I think that their ability to heal is just it outpaces the damage from the rogues, and then the fighter just turns around and kills them. So I think out of all of these characters, I think that rogues are actually the one matchup that fighters do have a pretty good matchup against, like comparatively. Rogues kind of just can't do shit about fighters, I feel like, for the most part. But I don't know if that means that they get to be an A tier. I don't know. Wizards, you don't go in D tier with the Warlock. Warlock is in a tier of his own still. Wizards go in the C tier. They're not... Fireball just needs to be better. You bring Fireball back to the way it used to be, we can bump Wizards up to like maybe B tier. But for now, they're pretty good at escaping. They're pretty good. They're pretty good at running away, which is a nice, honestly, a nice feature. If no character in this game can kill you, it's a draw as far as I'm concerned. But the problem is that Rangers still fuck up Wizards pretty badly. Fighters can chase them down and still kill them sometimes, and fighters also have access to bows. So these two characters usually can still track down and kill a wizard. And rogues as well. Rogues as well actually can still track down and kill a wizard. So they're not quite there yet. They need some way to fight off rogues. And they need some way to escape from rangers and fighters, basically. And they can kind of escape from rangers, but they just can't do shit to them. And rangers will just slowly whittle them away. And eventually the wizard will have to come back to leave the map. And the ranger will be there waiting with a bear trap and a bunch of arrows. So, I don't know. I don't know. Rogue? Rogue. Rogue is either A or B tier. You know what? I'm going to put Rogue in the A tier, I think. Again, want to reiterate, I cannot play Rogue because there's a limit to character slots. I don't have a great sense for how good Rogue is because I don't play them very much. But in my experience, Rogues are better at getting away than Wizards because they just move faster in general. Wizards have the access to haste, they have access to invisibility of spells, but they can only do it so much before they have to sit down for a little while and take a quick nap. Where Rogues can kind of are just always doing that shit effectively. They might not be able to do it in as much of a burst, but they're good at getting away. They don't have to fight everyone. They also, let's look at the matchups again. I think Rogues actually do kill Wizards. I think Wizards kind of just can't get away from Rogues on average, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But Rogues, I think if they get this, let's think of it this way. Sorry, let's think of it this way. When a Rogue ambushes you, who wins? I think Ranger versus Rogue, I think Rogue wins, right? I think Barbarian versus Rogue, I think usually Barbarian still wins, but it's very close. I think Fighter versus Rogue, I think Fighter usually wins still, even if Rogue gets the ambush. And then Cleric dies, Wizard dies, Warlock dies, Bard dies as well, right? So they've got a losing matchup to Barbarian and Fighter, but they win against Ranger. That's not bad. And they win against Ranger. They're carried by the fact that they win against Ranger here, I think, in general. But that's only if they get the jump on Ranger, right? That's only if they ambush. If they don't ambush, Ranger usually just slices them to pieces. I guess riddles them with bullets. I don't know. But anyway. Rogue's cool. Fun little thing about them, too, is that they're, I think, they're considered one of the best characters for killing the cave troll. I know that it's a very popular character because they move fast. It's very easy to dodge a lot of the cave troll's attacks. It's not really in my evaluation here, I guess, but it's a fun little thing about them if you want to, like, specifically kill the cave troll. Play a rogue, I guess. I don't know. I'm digressing. Let's move on. Bard. I talked a lot of good shit about Bard when it came to threes. I think Bard is a pretty ass character in solo play, but not as bad as the Warlock still. Warlock still is in the bottom tier, and I think, just coincidentally, I think this is actually in the order I would put these characters in too, right? I think I would put Cleric in the top of C tier, Wizard in middle, and I think Bard goes in the bottom of C tier. The main issue is that Bard has to make a lot of noise to give itself buffs. The buffs are really nice, but one thing that really sucks about playing the Bard is that you're giving away to your enemies your position, right? That's such a huge downside to not be able to ambush people, Right? That's crazy. That's such a huge deal to be like, oh, by the way, everyone, I'm over here. If anyone wants to come kill me, I'm gonna be 20% faster. But I am here, everyone. Hey, right? So it's an issue for sure for the character, especially when you're a 3-man stack. You've got your boys with you. It's okay if people know where you are, because you're coming to get them probably. You know, they should be running from the sound of you playing your loot, not running towards it usually. But I guess I digress there as well. I don't know. What does digress even mean? You know what I'm saying? Bards lose a lot of fights. I think though. I'm trying to think. Do they? No, they actually lose to every single character here above them on the list. I think they can kind of chase down wizards and kill them, and not really. I think on average lose 1v1s to clerics too, actually. Because the clerics just do the Windows Vista and just blast them for 1,000,000 damage, and then just bonk them once with the mace too. I think they lose pretty much every 1v1 here, most of the time. If they have the chance to buff up though, if they've got like 4 or 5 different buffs on them, I think they beat clerics. I think they usually beat rogues in a 1v1, but not always. And I think they still lose all the other matchups. And again, everyone beats Warlock. I'm sorry to say, Warlock. Get good. Yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else I want to talk about here? I don't know. No, that's it. That's it, I think. Those are my tier lists. Those are my tier lists for 3v3 and 1v1 gameplay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you strongly disagree with me, I would love to hear why. If you agree with me, then you can also tell me, I'm sure. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% correct, but I think I'm pretty close, like 80% probably to being correct here. I don't know. Maybe that's too much credit. I don't know. But either way, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And like maybe subscribe. Maybe, I don't know, you can maybe come subscribe or follow me. You don't have to subscribe to me. Maybe come follow me on Twitch. That'd be pretty cool. You know what? You can come to the Twitch page and call me a dog to my face while I'm streaming Dark and Darker. It should be a lot of fun. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway, I am going to leave. Goodbye.